Thank you, Michael. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos al Colegio de Morton College. Estamos súper felices de que estén aquí para dar inicio a la segunda residencia de Latino Thoughtmakers con Rick Najera. Un agradecimiento muy especial a Partnership for College Completion, PCC, por su apoyo en proveer al colegio con el conocimiento que nos permite eliminar los obstáculos institucionales para garantizar el éxito académico de nuestra comunidad estudiantil. Y a ustedes, muchas gracias por su apoyo para estar aquí para la discusión de hoy sobre la educación superior en las comunidades afroamericanas y latinas. Otra vez, bienvenidos al colegio, están en su casa y disfruten el evento. Muchas gracias.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. I know traffic was horrendous because I was coming from downtown too, and it was just awful. But thank you for making the trek to Morton College. We always like to talk about how our college is so small, but it has the largest heart. And please make yourself at home. We are here to serve you and serve our community. We're happy to kick off our second residency of Latino Thoughtmakers here with Rick Najera. It's been a great collaboration with him, knowing that we are in the same mission and really providing the voices for different people in the country to talk about their stories and share them here with our community. A special thanks to Partnership for College Completion. Where's Mr. Salcedo? Is he here? Thank you so much for coming. For their support in equipping Morton College with the knowledge to empower us in removing institution obstacles to ensure the academic success of our college community, and for their support for today's discussion about higher education in the Black and Brown communities. As I said before, please take advantage of this opportunity that we have here, that we are making space so that we could all work together and not compete with each other, and really providing the resources to our students, to the communities that we serve. Once again, welcome to Morton College. You are at home. Thank you.
Rick Najera grew up 15 miles from the border in San Diego, California. His father fought in World War II and served in Vietnam. His mother lost a brother fighting in World War II. Rick Najera came from an ordinary family, but they inspired him to believe that so-called ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Rick Najera seldom saw our Latino story told in Hollywood, and when it was told, it wasn't told by us. So he began to write plays, TV shows, and films like Nothing Like the Holidays set in Chicago. He was the first American Mexican descent to write, star, and produce a play on Broadway. Rick Najera wanted to tell all of our collective stories. And this is what Latino Thoughtmakers is, because Rick Najera believes together we are the solution, never the problem. This is Latino Thoughtmakers at Morton College, and here everybody's welcome.
Rick Najera! Thank you. It's so great to be back here at Morton College with an important discussion on Latino and African American education and the state of all that today in America today. I wanted to do this because education is very important to me. First of all, my background is that I went to junior college, like many other people did. I went to Grossmont College. And then eventually I went into a program that was a professional program for actors. I joined ACT, American Conservatory Theater of San Francisco, and I studied acting, and it was an MFA program, but I didn't have a degree yet, so I couldn't get an MFA. Cut to 30 years later, COVID hits, and all of a sudden I went back and got a degree. I went to Pierce College, and I got my degree in a 2 years program, and then I moved to Cal State Lutheran, where I did my BA in communication. And then I went back to ACT and got my MFA from American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. That was a long road in education, 30 years. 30 years to get my degrees. And, you know, I thought about it. I felt I had to do it for one reason, my children. I had to help my children with their homework, and I was helping them with their homework, and I kept going, I don't know the answer. I didn't help them with their homework and didn't know how to really reach them with their homework and how to tell them what to do. And I wanted to be a good, typical Latino parent. I wanted to teach them. So I went back to school, and I was able to go back and learn everything with school again, and was able to translate school once again to my children. It was a journey. It was a hard journey. It was not easy being in class. I was the oldest person in my entire class. I was called original source in my history class. They would say, he knew Pancho Villa, ask him. And I'm sure he knew Carlos Santana, and they'd ask me questions about him and 1,000 other people. But I was original source for them. I was older going back to school. I was shocked how old I was compared to them. I looked at these kids, and I was talking to them about different things that I experienced, and I liked it. I love teaching kids and being involved in school with them and going through what I experienced, because when I started teaching college, I was able to understand them far more. I knew what it was like to deal with deadlines and problems affording school and all these different things, and this bureaucracy that you had to work yourself through to understand how to even get a scholarship. All those things I didn't understand, and I had to relearn them. And I loved it. I loved it for one reason. It said that if I can do it, anyone can do it. I'm not an extraordinary person, but I do extraordinary things. And that's the lesson for all of us. And I want to thank, for the people that have brought this together, I want to take a moment to thank them. For the Partnership for College Completion, Mike Knott, Ruben Ruiz and the IT team, Joe Florio and facilities team, Rudy Flores and campus police, Perla Santoya, Blanca Jara, Pedro Martinez, Megan Blitz, Renee Salinas, Keep It Moving Media, Maria Anderson, Ana Valdez, Diego Aleman, Neil Moss, James O'Connell, Arena Klein, Ricardo Whitehead, Ivana Saucedo, Alexis Smith, and Leslie Santoya. It takes a whole village to put on this show. And that's what I like about this show. It's a conversation that people can have on any issue. We brought Dr. Cornel West here to talk about African American and Latino issues. We brought Edward James Olmos here. We brought a lot of different people here that talk about different aspects of what it means to be Latino. Latinos, we are the solution. We're never the problem. And that's what I love about this program, and that's what I love to bring these conversations to you all. Because these are important conversations. And probably the most important conversation I can have is on education. Education. I wondered why I was there many times. Many times I was like going, oh, this is the hardest thing I have ever done. And it was. It really was the hardest thing I ever did. But it was also the proudest thing I ever did. It was a completion that I needed to finally do to get my degrees and learn. Education. Education is about loving to learn. That's really it. I looked at it and I said, you know, I love to learn. And if you love to learn, you'll always keep growing. You'll never grow old. And that's one of the things I look at. These two people have worked in education for their entire lives. Now, Dr. Jamillah Moore, Dr. Ted Martinez, both have worked in education. Dr. Jamillah Moore is an author, an advocate, and a Justice Forum advocate. And she's also a college president. Right now, she's vice president of student affairs at San Francisco State University. Ted Martinez, he's a migrant farm worker. He told me that. One day we started talking about his education, and I didn't know that. He was an actual migrant farm worker, and he became a community college president, and he started the NCHCC. Dr. Ted Martinez's NCHCC is a leadership fellowship program for Latinos to get them in administration and highest levels of administration. And that to me is amazing because it's a question of, it's multifaceted. You need students, and that's what we need, and that's what's first in our agenda. But you need to have educators that need to know about students and also have to be culturally competent to understand the issues that Black and brown students have. And also you need to have teachers that know these students and truly care. That's what I see. And I understand and know that these two people care the most. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Ted Martinez and Dr. Jamillah Moore. See, that was not flash. See, the thing is, we do abrazos. That's basically it. Please sit right there. What a unique thing. So, this is our question. We're talking about black and brown. Black and brown, and the reason I included black and brown is I think we're stronger together than apart. And I think many of the same issues that affect the African American community affect the Latino community as well. And I don't think us solving this problem alone in our little pockets is really going to achieve anything. I think the problem has to be solved in the greater part of our world of African American and Latino problems that we're putting this under the heading, and that's education. Education is the way out. Education is the thing that we can do and learn and move us up. So my question is, what is the state of Latin and African American education in the United States today? Jamillah?
Well, let's start with an easy question, right? Yeah, okay. First of all, thank you for having me, Rick. Thank you. It's always great to be back at Morton College. I have to say that, we've made some strides, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. I think the issue of access for both Black and Brown students is critical. It's ongoing. And I believe that while education is a great equalizer,
Yes.
the ability for our students to have access to quality education is the continued struggle. So we have a lot of work, I think, still to do.
Dr. Martinez?
I have to agree with Dr. Moore. We have made some strides. More and more Latino students are coming. More and more Latino leaders are coming to my program, and so I see a better future. But it's still a lot of work to be done.
Now, tell me about your program.
This is a program that was started back in 1985, part of the National Community College Hispanic Council. That's a lot to say, but the Ford Foundation funded an initial program where 72 fellows back in the early 80s offered in the country. The foundation funding ended, and so I became president of the organization in 2003. And I asked the board to start it over again. So since 2003, we've had this program that prepares Latina and Latinos who aspire to become presidents of community colleges. So we have a program that offers top-level, top-notch presenters, presidents, chancellors, vice presidents who have a lot of experience to share with the fellows, and then a year-long mentorship where they have monthly discussions to help them move through and get them ready for the next level.
So you're creating a chance to network among Latinos.
Yes.
Which is?
It's really creating a familia. I call it a familia because they learn to support each other. They now I have 310 fellows in 28 states. So they know how to reach out. If I'm going to apply at an institution somewhere, they can call that fellow that works there. And I want to thank the fellows that are here. Magahara is a 2021 fellow. Luis Narvaez was here. He's a 2022 fellow. So they're all over the country. That's what they do.
And Blanca Jara, I know her, so I think she's an incredible woman. She's an actual fellow. She's part of this.
Yes.
And her goal, right now, she's a vice president, and you're hoping to see her become a president and eventually bring up other people.
Absolutely. And that is happening. We just placed the 20th president in about 10 states out of this program. So we are making progress.
The 20th president so far. Now, that's incredible. That's the work I think a lot of times people don't see as necessarily those sexy issues that people talk about. I think it's the tantamount issue that people deal with. Now, Jamillah, I always like to say, in terms of really ask these questions, Tom Sinek, in his TED Talk, talks about the why. Why did you go into education? Is there a moment to you that you really look to as the reason why?
I went into education for a couple of reasons, but I think primarily because I was raised by a single parent, the youngest of 6, all girls, and my mother gave us choices coming up. And she had always said that if the higher you go in education, the more opportunities you will have, the more freedom you'll have. And so that's stuck with me, first and foremost. But also, too, I saw most of my family, working class individuals, they didn't get the opportunity to go to college. So I was always brought up with, if you get the opportunity, you need to take advantage of it. So that was one main reason. The other reason is I didn't see a lot of folks in college and in college levels that looked like me. But I was fortunate enough to have a teacher in middle school who really supported the work that I was doing and saw something in me, and she encouraged me to go as far as I could, as high as I could in education. And having someone see something within you was eye-opening for me, but it really kind of led the pathway. So I took advantage of that and had an opportunity, once I graduated high school, getting into college, taking advantage of what we call wraparound services and programs that help students who are economically disadvantaged. So it was an EOP program that helped me. It was
EOP too.
Yeah, Education Opportunity Program. But I'm also an alumni of what I call Healthy Start, which was a federal program that helped a lot of parents with students at a very early age. And so it was programs like that that really helped me see the importance of education, but also gave me the support. And I turned around and I wanted to give that back to other people in my community.
I think the lesson there is if you can see an example, you can be an example.
Absolutely.
And that was also, you mentioned, that you didn't see many people that looked like you.
Not in leadership positions, I did not.
You did not see many people in leadership positions that
Not
looked like
vice
you.
presidents, not presidents, maybe a dean or two. And so when I did get the opportunity to meet a vice president as a woman of color, I was wowed by that. And so learning about that individual's path, but also seeing that the doors and the other opportunities that can be provided. When you're in these positions, and they're not easy positions to be in, one of our jobs, or our main job, is student success. So I define student success as ensuring that every student has access. So my lens is a little different because I want to make sure that every student has the opportunity to come to the college, but to be successful and to ensure their success. So I may see things, or I may be looking for things or opportunities that are going to help students stay on that path. Many of our students, even before the pandemic, while we're in the pandemic, have a lot of challenges. And so I see many of the students that we work with as high need, low resourced. And so can we put opportunities in front of them, help them with those resources, help them address those levels of access so that we can close that gap.
I think that the point is about if you can see an example, you can be an example. I see it in Hollywood. We don't see many producers that are Latino. We don't see many writers who are Latino. And that's always been the problem. When I teach writing, I have everyone say I'm a writer. First day of class, they introduce themselves and say, "Hi, I'm Rick, and I admit I'm a writer." It's like a 12-step program. But that 12-step program, to say you're a writer and to claim you're a writer, is the beginning of believing in yourself.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. And you saw a chance to say you could be an administrator.
Yeah.
And it's worked amazingly well for you.
Well, before I saw a chance I could be an administrator, when I got the opportunity via a scholarship to go to graduate school, get a master's, it was that program at California State University, Sacramento, that allowed me also the opportunity to teach. So being in the classroom as well helped me to really kind of hone my skill set of wanting to ensure access, because so many of the students would look at me as, wow, this is a person of color, but she's here and she's helping us. So that opportunity and the ability to kind of help other students along their path, but being in front of a class of folks while it is diverse, I was probably maybe one of only two black instructors, black graduates, TAs as they called us at that time. And I had students that would really approach me about trying to get assistance, try to get help, but also how do they navigate through the program.
That's one thing that I've noticed is that many people haven't seen themselves in those positions. I myself, going back to my education, the first time I ever had a Latino teach me in my entire career was last year. It was a course I took. It was Chicano Studies. I took Chicano Studies, and it was taught by Chicano. So that was really good. And he was, to me, a homeboy. He'd be like, okay, we're talking about Chicano Studies, and right now, we're talking about Cesar Chavez. It's really important. And I was listening to him, and I'm like, this is like a homeboy. And he was a college, a professor. And it made me more engaged. I became more engaged because I saw myself in him, and I listened to him much more. And I saw that he knew the problems. He was able to talk about his experience as well. Dr. Martinez, you have had a storied career in education, but how'd your beginning tells you more about your why?
Well, I had, there's some similarities in what you shared, because I grew up in a small town in South Texas. It was about 1,600 people, a small town. Most all Mexicanos, most of them spoke Spanish. All of us spoke Spanish, and the why that you were asking came from my parents. My parents had 7 children, and they never learned Spanish or English. They never learned English, and so they wanted their 7 children to be able to learn English because they didn't want us to have difficulty they had in their life. And so they committed to have their 7 children go through, and we all finished high school. So that's where my interest in education came. Along the way, I had some teachers, as you did, Oscar Villarreal, who took me aside in the 8th grade, and he said, you're college material, you should look into going to college. And that's the first time I ever heard college. And so that began to, that stayed in my mind. I said, yeah, I'll think about that. In the meantime, prior to that, I was a migrant farm worker. My family began traveling to the north. I drove my family from this little town called Asherton to Bay City, Michigan, 2,400 miles, to work in the fields in the summers. But what they wanted to make sure that we didn't miss school. So as soon as school ended, we're off and running to the north. We'd come back before school started. So that was a commitment to ensuring that all 7 children finished high school.
How old were you when you started driving?
I was 10 years old.
10 years old. So you started driving when you were 10 years old, which is a whole different ballgame to understand that many children have had to be translators for their parents, be lawyers for their parents, read contracts and things like that, have had to help their parents navigate through America. And you were doing that at 10 years old.
That's right.
Which was, were you ever stopped? With your driver's license?
Actually, I was 14 at that time. We were coming back from Piedras Negras, Mexico, which is a border town close to Asherton. And so I had taken my mother to see a doctor over there. So we were coming back, and there was a border patrol stop. And so, I drove up, and the border patrol asked me, "U.S. citizens?" Yes. And all my family was there. And so he said, how old are you, son? I said, 14. So you have a driver's license? He says, no. And so I explained to him, I'm the oldest in the family. I had to take my mother to a doctor. He said, well, you can't be driving without a driver's license. So the highway patrol was on the other side. So here comes the highway patrol. He says, I have to give you a ticket. And I tried to explain to him. It didn't matter. So you're going to get a ticket. So that got me to go get a driver's license. I learned something. I was driving at that age because my father had kind of lost his eyesight. So it turned out I needed glasses too. So most of us were, but I got a little better sight. So that's kind of how I got into that. So and then at that age, then he said, well, now that you can drive, now that you have a license, let's go up north. So that's how I started going up north.
Wow. So you're going up north, driving your family, stepping in for your father.
7 kids, yeah.
And a lot of times people don't understand. It's like, I'll have people say, don't work so much, Rick. Take it easy. And it's like, I have to work. It's like, we all have to work. We have to do these jobs and we have to look after our families. That's one of the unique things about us as people of color who are doing this sort of work. And that's also what I wonder when it comes to college students is how do we help them stay in school? What if programs do you think work?
I think what's happening right now, so it's been happening for years, is colleges is costly for many students, and especially students who are economically disadvantaged. And I think we need to ensure that scholarships or financial aid or those types of programs that provide support are really covering the cost of attendance. Sometimes students can cover the tuition, but it's that transportation, it's the housing, it's the food, it's all of those things wrapped in around that. I'll give you an example. I think at the CSU system, the tuition is incredibly affordable for 1 year. It's maybe $7,800, $7,900, but it will be the housing and the food and the transportation. So all of that combined can make that year of going to college incredibly expensive. Many of our students have to work in order to provide for themselves and their families in order to go to school. So where I think we need to do more is to ensure that, financial aid really is helping students to cover the cost of attendance so they can stay in school. And encouraging every single high school junior or senior to fill out a FAFSA before they graduate high school. So many more of our students can have that level of awareness of what financial aid that they have available to them, so they can know how to plan, but so they can also see themselves, as we call it, beginning to learn that college-going culture and that ability to understand. I was a first-gen college graduate in my family. Others had gone, but they didn't finish. So I didn't have others that I could go to and ask questions. So if it wasn't for an EOP program or some of those services educating me on the process, I know I would not have made it. But it was also if I didn't have financial aid to help me because there was no resources in my family. So raising a level of awareness, but encouraging students to learn about college before they get to college. And so I think in California, we now have a law that requires all high school seniors to complete the FAFSA application, which is the federal financial aid application, so they can know what they're eligible for. We still have many students, especially students going to community college, that will think either they can't have financial aid or financial aid has to be paid back. Most of financial aid doesn't have to be paid back unless it's a loan. But it's raising that level of awareness and helping students understand and try to navigate that path.
Now, I went through FAFSA to myself, and actually I got some grants. I still had some student loans, which was unique for me. Is I had to pay for my graduate school. There's like they actually charge. I was able in a lot of ways to mitigate the pay. One is they forgot to charge me for my last semester, and it's really the true story. because ACT was actually closing, and so they were going to do away with their graduate program, and they forgot to ask me for my money for my tuition. And then when I told them, well, they just said, let it go. Just don't worry, we're not asking you. Let that money go. And I was like, thank you. Okay, great. They wanted us, and they were deeply committed to seeing students graduate and understand what the business was about. Vocation, that's also one of the issues with our people, is that we're torn between working or educating. How do you see we're able to tell a student that an education is important right now, to be in school? How do we tell them it's important to stay in school when they're looking at the cost of education is so much?
You want to take it? Okay.
Go ahead, Ted.
No, I think that it's important that we encourage and use systems at our community colleges to bring in our Black and Brown, all students to the community colleges. But we have I think our community college leaders, in addition to providing those systems, need to ensure that we have strategies that are student-centered, that they're focused on the student, that they have student-centered teachers, administrators, staff, counselors, all those that know and accept the students that come, whatever color they are, whatever nationality they are, and be able to understand that they have a different language, that we need to be able to respond, to be responsive to that, and have instruction that is culturally good for them. So it's all those things together, I think, is what will help once they get to us. But before that, I think we need to do more in getting out into the high schools and trying to reach out and bring them in with special programs that will bring them into the campus, and then have them move up from there.
I think a lot of times, programs like this actually reach out to members in the community. I think with Latinos especially, that we have to see that we're welcome, that college is their home as well.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times they don't. I can tell you a story that I taught a class one time, and I'm not gonna say what college or where it was, but one of the programs I was taught students to write, and to write their story, to tell their story and to write it. And a woman told her story in my class, and she talked about living in her car. She was living in her car, and the other instructor said, "Oh my God, I can't believe your dad made you live in your car." And she broke down and ran out of the room. And I went and I found her and I said, "I'm sorry that the teacher said that to you." She goes, I brought shame to my father. I made him seem like a horrible man. He was a great man. And I said, he didn't know you lived in your car, did he? She goes, "No, of course not." I go, "I knew that." I go, you have said your story, and never be ashamed of it." And that was what I noticed, is there was a disconnect between certain teachers that didn't know the culture, that didn't know what people go through to get there. Do we have programs that can teach teachers, that have opportunities?
Yes, we do, and I'm sure many folks in the audience probably know that too. I think what you're describing, though, is the issue of culturally competent. Many of our students don't really share or divulge what's happening in their lives, because for so many years there was a lot of shame around that. I mean, I come from an old school family in the sense that my mother always taught us you don't bring your problems to people outside the family. And so when you're raised that way, you don't know how to go and just say, "I need help, I need X, I need Y." And so it's really about being able to just ask questions a certain way, but knowing how to be culturally competent in doing that. And I'll give you an example, and I'm sure many of the audience can relate to this. When you're the auntie or the uncle or the brother who has gotten the college degree, you then de facto become the person that answers all college questions, right? You'll get the email, you get the call, and I have to say to my people, my nieces and nephews, please don't call me on the day of it's due, and don't call me 24 hours and ask me to create a miracle. And so I'm dealing with individuals who are well-intentioned, but I call them the app generation, because they use and do everything on their phone. And so if you can't put it into 30-second sound bites, they can't always understand it. But they're also the generation where they won't divulge key pieces of information. And as we know, in families that have been historically economically deprived, you have people who are at different levels in the family. You folks have some college degrees, they're doing differently. You have some high school, and I have sisters who didn't finish high school. So there's a variety. And as you know, you learn how to code switch and how to speak to who in certain ways, because you don't want to make them feel less than in anything that they're doing. So I have nephews that I have to call and will have to ask them questions a certain way. Okay, so I'll say, "Rick, did you get all the information for school?" "Uh-huh." "Did you fill it out?" "Did you look at it?" "Did you look at the deadline?" You laugh because you know you've done this before. "Did you look at the deadlines?" And you have to ask him that way, not. And I always say it's called tough love. And I say, as an auntie, I will be in your business. I say, because I can't be standing somewhere and you're the kid that doesn't get your financial aid in because you didn't know who to ask and you thought I'd be too busy. So I have to come at you a different way. But I come at you with that level of love to say, I'm going to ask you some very poignant questions because I want to make sure you have what you need, you have it in time. And so we have students that what we call need basic needs, but they also need people who can talk to them in a manner that lets them know that they care. So I have to give you examples of what will happen if you don't give me the information before it happens. So I'll have to say, I'm going to ask you these questions because I need to know, because if you miss this deadline over here, you can't get your cow fresh over there, then you may not get all the funds you'll need in order to get you through the semester for the food. So I can't stop with, did you finish the application? I have to give them all of it so they can process and understand that piece. And then sometimes, depending on their level of trauma, will depend on how fast or how slow I can give them that information. And so it's the ability to understand that.
The ability to understand. I mean, I think that actually is good, because there's many times when I was in school that I forgot to ask about the deadline. And there was a different thing. There was a hard deadline. I was kind of looking at it that sometimes I wouldn't know that. And I have to look on over and go, okay, this is the deadline. I need to get it done here. I had to pace myself through school.
Yeah.
And those are things that we assume everyone would know. And it's, you feel embarrassed to ask that question. At least I did as a student, that I forgot to say, I just have one more question. And it's also, we feel a lot of times we're reluctant to ask because the teacher, it seems very busy, and so-and-so looks like they're having a lot of questions, and it's really hard to ask a question.
Or sometimes there's the anxiety of, well, if I ask the question, they're going to think I'm stupid because I'm the one asking the question and I look like I don't know. So for those of you who are parents, I have to role play with my kid because they don't always know all the other ins and outs. And so I'll start asking the questions that I think he should be asking that he may not want to ask. So I'll role play. And sometimes you have to do what you need to do in order to get the information out in a manner that the student will be able to process.
It's also, I think for me, I'm the first person in my family to graduate, to get a BA. I'm the only person to ever got an MFA. And that is hard for people to understand, that we are very unique.
Yes.
I looked at other kids that parents were doctors or lawyers, had gone through the system, understood, and there was an expectation that they would go to college. There was an expectation. There was no expectation I would go to college. And consequently, my family didn't understand the importance of college, or even if we could be in college. So I was the first person in my family to graduate. I don't know if you were first?
Yes.
So you have 3 people on this stage in education were the first people to graduate. That's why it's important when I say I graduated, how rare it is, how unique it is. How do you see how we're able to teach cultural competency to teachers?
I think that and there's some programs available, but I think that it needs to be something that is done intentionally. I think districts, high school districts, community colleges need to have professional development programs to prepare our teachers to help those students that are coming in. So that's how I see that coming forward.
Yeah, that's the thing is that a lot of times, and I'm not saying this in any way to ever say that that a teacher doesn't have cultural competency if they're not Latino or African American. Sometimes there's Latinos that don't have cultural competency. I think it's something you have to really study and learn, and that's the beginning of. And that's about how do we retain African American or Latino teachers? Through the system of finding these professors, how are the committees formed to find those professors? How do you find that?
I think really, I started teaching because I had an opportunity as a graduate student to be a TA, and that opened the door. But it was really a faculty internship program. And I think you have to, districts and large district schools need to be intentional about trying to increase the faculty ranks that look like the students they are serving. So I think that one way is to look at faculty internship programs and those that, purposefully look for teachers that will reflect the student body, and giving those instructors the opportunity that if you come into a faculty internship program, you can teach with a lead teacher or a master teacher for a semester or two, and then upon completion of that program, you get an opportunity to become an adjunct instructor. And that way they get a chance to work with individuals and bring them in, and that's a way of creating a pipeline. I think those types of programs can be invaluable, but I think also too, it builds a level of trust for individuals who are on the campus and those who want an opportunity to come in and teach. And I think you can find some folks who are really, really well qualified who want to come and support the campus.
I mean, there is things of saying, there's programs that you can get equivalency, to teach, which is important, but that's still a barrier for many people. With me, teaching is I have probably one of the best resumes I ever could imagine in terms of theater. I've been on Broadway. I've been on all these different things to understand, but I'm still a first beginning teacher. And so there's going to be times of pushback on that. How are these committees formed that can help to bring people in?
Well, and that's part of the issue is that we have, in California, we have search committees that are composed of staff and faculty. And sometimes we don't see people like us, that look like us.
Yeah.
And so it's we need to ensure that there is some, to bring in faculty. There needs to be a commitment from the board, from the president, to ensure that we're bringing in faculty. And I'm going to say that I just saw last week, I was at San Diego State University, and the president, because representation matters.
Representation.
The president, who is Dr. Adela La Torre, the first president of a CSU system. And the College of Education reported that out of 8 faculty hires in the College of Education, 7 were Latino and Latinos. That's unprecedented.
7.
But so we need to open up doors as leaders in our institutions, and the process is not easy, and that's why and I think what you were saying about having outside experience. I think outside experience out of education is an important part of being an excellent professor, an excellent teacher, because you bring that outside world into the classroom. I mean, that's a value that sometimes we miss when we don't allow that kind of entry for professionals.
Yeah, I noticed even when I was teaching in a lot of different schools, was that some of the faculty had never worked in the business, had never worked in the vocation.
Yes.
And for students, they want to have the outcome.
Yes.
They're looking to go, they want to see someone who's actually been in the situation. It's almost like this. You can be a graduate of West Point, and you'll understand military, how things are done and historical, how the military is used and certain things like that. But I'm kind of like the sergeant that'll get you saved, that will help you get through Vietnam. So I was coming at that from that perspective of having a vocation and having an outcome, to look at the outcome. Is there a way to have more of an opportunity for people outside to come in?
Yes, but I think also too, the faculty union and the faculty senate play a really large role in this process. And so I think every year, different disciplines are looking to increase ranks where others retire and they're bringing new individuals in. I think it's an opportunity to have a conversation about equivalency and trying to have that conversation about looking at equivalency of a certain percentage of individuals who are in the industry. You yourself, I think, would be an excellent example of someone who's in the industry of entertainment that we would, I think any campus would want to bring in and hone in skills and support. And I think many of our students would want to learn from you. So that opportunity to work with that department chair or that dean of that school to talk about, as you look at increasing your faculty ranks every semester, every year, they have so many that are coming in because we have folks who are retiring. How can we diversify, not just along demographic lines, but industry and skill set? And then having that conversation up front about looking at equivalency. Because for those folks who come in, those are all new union members that will help those faculty ranks. And so understanding and negotiating that relationship, but being able to sit at the table and talk about what that looks like, I think can go a really long way, because those types of needs and our need to want to have more quality teachers that reflect our students, I think is a negotiation. And so are folks having those conversations early and often so that you can begin to really diversify those ranks in a multitude of ways.
In a multitude of ways. And the same as for educators, in terms of how do you see educators in terms of the Black and brown experience able to be in there and have the opportunities to teach students?
Well, so I'm back on, we are still short on Latino, and Black professors and teachers. We don't have them yet. So when you say how do we retain them, I'm focused on getting them in. And so there's a lot of problems with that process, especially if the district is not interested in diversifying the staff and the administration. So, you know, these committees that are set up, as I said earlier, don't always represent us. And so it's difficult to get through that process. As a president, I would get three nominees to hire but those nominees look like the group that was processing those. So that's an area that we need a lot of work to do. We need to ensure that our boards and leaders of our institutions have a commitment to diversity to bring faculty of color into our institutions.
And that's really it. It's the commitment to diversity. You know, it does start with there. It's not. Many times, if you don't have people that really care about bringing diversity or give it lip service, who say, you know, because that happens in Hollywood all the time. Everyone in Hollywood, we want to bring in diversity. They always say that every time. And I've worked in diversity, and a lot of times they don't. You know, you'd be surprised. Or they'll feel it's enough. You know, a lot of times they'll look and go, hey, there's more Latinos. And it's true, there are more Latinos. But the numbers is like 6%. And then when it's really about 30%. And also the Latinos are actually the most consumers of entertainment. We consume more entertainment per capita than any other group of people is us. So we should be in Hollywood. I can just see that in terms of Hollywood. It's a microcosm of the problems in the area of America, that we see it, that we go, where we have so many Latinos. People might look at you and when you say seven new hires were brought in, and they would go, wow, that's amazing. That's nothing. It's nothing because it's making up for the years and years of no one being there.
But you're also assuming, though, Rick, that it's the totality of the problem is a much larger scope.
Yes.
It would require a multitude of things to take shape. And the reason I say that is because every year we hear in the teaching profession how many teachers we're losing versus those that are coming in. Every year you'll hear a story in August about many districts. While they may be more K through 12 than higher ed, they're always looking for teachers because this is not an easy profession to be successful in. And I think we need to do a multitude of things. But one of the things, and I'll use a technical term, we need to do better at succession planning. And here's my technical phrase, because we suck at it. I don't know about you, but succession planning in any district, we don't do a really good job of it because the current profession has so many people taxed. I'm sure Dr. Martinez has experienced this. I've experienced this. You've experienced this. If you're one of only 2 or 3 in your department, you become automatically in charge of all things Black, right? You become in charge of all things Latinx, and the amount of responsibility, and then and that's separate and aside from the students. So if we could get many things lined up, resources for succession planning, professional development and training, and also support for folks who have been asked to do a lot of work with an impossible timeline and no resources at all. And then also too, we should be using our largest commodity as our students. Students will tell you what they need if you listen and tell you, what works for them. So if we can get industry as well as those in state and federal government working together, it is a problem that we can fix. But we have to be realistic and we have to be focused on the timeline because, it's a numbers game in the sense that historically, like over a century, people of color and women weren't even allowed to be in these positions. So of course, we're going to be a little behind. But the opportunities should remain that we can be much more aggressive in how we target and do outreach. According to the American Association of Community Colleges, out of the 12 or 1,300 community colleges, only 10% of their CEOs are Black. And that's, and that's a number that fluctuates because not everybody stays in those fields. But they talk about the programs that are working, but that may be one program or two programs to serve the entire nation. They talk about the Lincoln Institute, which is a wonderful program. I came through it before I became a college president, but that's one or two programs for the entire nation. They talk about the program that Dr. Martinez is doing, but he's one of two that's doing a program in the entire nation. So we really need many more hands on the table or people at the table to try and talk about how we can really move the needle on this, because as you know, it just takes time, but we need time, more resources, and a level of consistency.
You know, I had someone who went, Keith Ballard. He did a TED Talk. I recently saw it. And he visited something like 27 countries and studied all their programs. He came back with looking at vocational schools, how vocational schools helped. But he also told me one thing about Singapore. Singapore was like, a generation ago, was about 99% illiterate. Now it's a giant of Asia. There's only less than 1% of people in Singapore that are illiterate. So there is chances, there is opportunities, but you have to have the desire to have that happen. So.
Yeah, I think it takes more than desire, because we still have huge levels of poverty. And you know, I just think it takes many more opportunities to allow people to be able to feed themselves and cover their full cost of attendance so that they can come in and be students and be successful. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, if you have to choose between if I'm going to go to school or if I'm going to try and, you know, pay for food, we just have to look at it from a larger perspective of this is the village, and we all need to participate in the village in order for our students to be successful.
So you're saying participate in the village, and it's also vocational, that
Yes.
we need industry in the village as well, because they're the ones benefiting from a stronger workers.
Yeah, it can't just be the school district. I think it takes corporations. I think that it takes both the federal government and the state governments, and even the city councils and county governments. It's, you know, if education and public education is going to be free, I think we need many more resources to sustain it, but also to ensure that we have a level of support for students so that they can be successful. Because many of our teachers will tell you the needs of our students has changed and their needs have increased. And what we are asking one or two individuals to do is a lot. And so I just want to make sure that we're putting programs in place that we can scale up so that our students can be successful. Because it feels like we have one or two, but we don't have enough.
That's an important thing, is getting it right in the smaller level,
Yeah.
so we can scale up. Dr. Martinez, your thoughts?
And I would add leadership to
Yes.
what you're saying, that we need to prepare the leaders. In the same way, in the Hispanic community, out of the 1,100 community colleges, only 64 Latino presidents out of 1,000. So we're like 4%. So we're nowhere near where we need to be. And so this program, the Fellows Program, is working on expanding that. And as I said earlier, representation matters. So then now you have Latino presidents who are focused on the total community, including the Latino students that come to their institutions. And so that is critical to the future. We are the future, and Latino population is going straight up. So we need to be ready, and that means our institutions need to be committed and ready to make sure that there are faculty and administrators who look like those students that are coming to their institutions.
I saw that I went to Google to speak for Hispanic Heritage Month, and great speech, great time, all that stuff. And they said, we're really sorry. There was only 20 people at my speech, and I was shocked. And I said, yeah, I was surprised to see that. I hope there was nothing wrong with my speech, or they didn't like me or something like that. And they said, no. They thought you were wonderful and all that. And I said, where are the Latinos here? And they said, you'll see them at lunch. And I said, I'll see the Latinos at lunch? He said, oh yeah, it'll be filled with Latinos there. And it was everyone behind the counter bringing food out and serving them. That's where all the Latinos were. And I sat there and watched them, and I said, everyone with a hairnet here, basically, is Latino. On the other end, you had people from around the world, the best of, brought there. And they people that make Silicon Valley. Because originally Silicon Valley was a bunch of farms. That's what it was. You know, it was fruit trees. It was all those places there in Silicon Valley. And I know that. The people that are there aren't benefiting from Silicon Valley. They're behind the kitchen. And that's what I worry. And is there a way to change that?
Well, yeah, I mean, because, I think all of us on this stage are products of ways in which that were changed by programs that reached out to economically disadvantaged students.
Yes.
It's the example of, taking those programs and helping them to scale up. But many of our students are working in areas where they are struggling to feed themselves and to keep a roof over their head, or they are also contributors to the overall family income. And so it's helping them to figure out a way to step into a college and still accomplish all of those needs and those goals to keep their family together or to keep themselves together. So we have programs designed for, once again, our high needs, low resource students, but I'm not certain if we have enough of them to really reach the need is greater than there are resources. We have Guardian Scholars programs for emancipated foster youth. We have programs for our veterans. It's about if we have enough of those programs and resources and those students reaching out where that need can be met. And some of that work has started, has been working over the years, but I think the need is much greater than the resources right now. But they're out there. I mean, because I've benefited from one. You benefited from it. Mm-hmm. Ted, you benefited from it. How do we scale it up and get the word out so that students in high school or even in middle school can know that there is an opportunity for them to go to college?
I mean, there's students that especially the Latino community, work is a lot of times what keeps them in. In other words, it's like, can I learn something here that's going to help me to get a job? How can that be really truly of service? Latinos, I know in my family, my father was brilliant. He basically had no high school education. He worked at North Island Naval Air Station, and I saw him bring home maps and programs for F-14 Phantoms. He learned to build F-14 Phantoms and work on them. It's a level of intelligence and training. And here he was with barely a high school education, but he did it. Yeah. So I know that we have the ability.
Oh, absolutely. Here's where I would go back to. We really need to utilize our students. Students talk to other students, and that resonates with them. And what I have seen work really well in the past, and I think we need to do more of it, is in those areas where the need is great, bring your students who have similar backgrounds to come talk in areas where they can speak to students who look like them. I mean, when you get to school, everybody knows which teachers not to take, right? Yeah. And isn't that amazing how we can all figure that out like in a second? I think we should utilize that same skill set. So if we know that there is a need in certain communities, bring students in who have backgrounds where they are really low resource, but they found a way to make it through, and put them in front of other students to talk to. Then they can see someone that looks like them, navigate that space. We do that every semester for our emancipated foster youth because they don't know all the time how to register for their housing, but they need housing. Mm-hmm. So we will have other students who are also out of the foster care system come and talk to them while they're juniors and seniors in high school, to talk to them about the system and the process. And it never fails. We always have one or two students, and those who have self-identified, because if they don't tell you, you don't always know. He'll say, my goodness, thank you so much, Dr. Moore, because I didn't think I could go. No one spoke to me about that. I didn't even know I could get financial aid or there was housing. I could have said that till I was blue in the face, but they had to see somebody else with a similar background or the exact same background tell their story of how they navigate it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's the type of work we need to do, and we need to keep doing that work and asking our students to share their stories. Because as you've talked about, and the importance of Latino thought makers, the ability to share our stories is critical.
But Latino thought makers, some of the people that we've had here and we've been able to talk and hear the stories, because it's a casual conversation.
Yeah.
You know, it's a casual conversation. I want people to understand Ted Martinez came from farm workers. That's part of what came. You know, Dr. Moore was also comes from a poor family. I came from a poor family. We were 5 kids in a 1-bedroom home in La Mesa. In fact, my children are here today, Sonora and Kennedy. They speak beautiful Spanish. But I put them in Spanish school, so they understood that. But we lived in La Mesa. We were poor. There's another guy who lived in La Mesa, was Juan Vargas, who's now a congressman. And there's me, and there's also Elena Choa, who was an astronaut. We are ordinary people that do extraordinary things. That's what Black and brown students do. And that's what I want people to see. So, you know, Dr. Martinez, you have a program that is revolutionary. What ways do you need for us to help you?
Well, I think this program is making a difference nationally, and it's important because we don't have enough of our Latino presidents in our community colleges. I think one of this program needs to be, I think, multiplied. You know, this is one program that puts in 24 fellows a year, and they're very successful. And I tell you, 8 of them are vice chancellors, 38 of them became vice presidents, 33 become deans. So it's very successful, but it's only one program. It's the only program in the country that's doing this specifically to help Hispanics move up the organization. So we need to multiply those. We need to maybe have governmental support for it. It's very difficult to get funding for this type of a program. It's not easily readily available. So I think that we need to increase the number, and that'll help expand our participation.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we always have enough money for the military.
Yeah.
We always have enough money for tax breaks. We have always enough money for those things. But there's last to think about is education. We don't, you know, when I hear we don't have the money, and I go, well, we have money for a lot of things, but it's not about education. I think it is about us all having commitment to education, to care about our children, to care about our community, and understand that education is our necessary right. You know, the student loans, forgiving student loans. I remember what came out about that is there certain people were very upset about student loans. They were forgiving student loans. They're angry about student loans and that they're being forgiven. They went back, and every congressman that was against it had 400,000 forgiven in PPE loans, had 300,000 forgiven in PPE loans, and have 200,000 in forgiven in PPE loans. But they were upset about students losing, you know, being given a $10,000 loan. And that's the problem. You know, the problem I think in America is that we're not a we generation that are about we. We're about me. And every single time I hear that, that's the argument I hear is that me, I want, you know, my rights, my thing. It's not about we. We're only gonna work together if it's we. And we'll only work and get ahead if it's we. Because if we can reach back and pull someone up, we live in a better society. And that's what I see with your two work, your work in this field, and what you continue to do. It's brilliant. It's amazing. You care. I see you care. And that's why I wanted you to come here for Latino Thought Makers and have this conversation today. Thank you so much. Now, what we wanted to do is, it is a conversation, so we have an opportunity to have people ask questions. And please you have this opportunity now. We'll take some questions from the audience.
Dr. Martinez.
You're gonna set me up.
I hear this all the time, but it is important. Is this on?
Yes.
It is important that the audience here learns about the needs that your fellows across the country are facing, and also the students that they're serving. What have you found out through serving those fellows?
Well, I think as I reached out to before coming here, I reached out to fellows who are presidents in Texas, in New York, and Washington, and they're facing problems with faculty and staff not wanting to come back because of COVID. So those are some challenges they're having at their institutions. They're having issues with students not. You mentioned the hunger and the financial problems with their. But I think one of the things that they will tell me that as Latino leaders, Latino leaders, they are also having some pushback in their institutions, and they're having to double down, and they get confronted sometimes about if you're talking about Latinos too much, and so they're having to learn how to navigate through those things. But the important part is that they're there and they're beginning to show that we can make a difference, and that's their.
Are they getting pushback from their committees and boards and all the other politics we see?
All of the above. I think and for example, I can give you a case of a faculty member who is very, very qualified. She's got a doctorate. She's applied 3 times in that institution for a position in sociology, and she gets rejected every time. We don't know why.
Yeah, because it's always a mystery.
And so those are the kinds of things that our Latino leaders are going to have to work with and try to increase that diversity across the country.
And actually, the place you're talking about, not to say what it is, but it happens to be a college that is predominantly Latino.
Yes,
That are, and that's the other problem, is that people that don't see an educator, like myself, who didn't see an educator till late in my career, that happened to be Latino. That is amazing to me. And also when we're in Latino communities, like Morton College reaches out to their community. Morton College is here. I like Latino thought makers because people can come, that are the parents of the students. They can come and take a look at this and be part of the campus. And that's what an education should be. Education, it should be available for all. So that is one of the things we can work on.
Absolutely.
Another question.
So I kind of have 2 questions. My name is Aaron Padawar, and I work here. We're in student success. So my question is for both Dr. Moore and Dr. Martinez. Specifically with the program that Dr. Martinez runs, and then also Dr. Moore, you mentioned a program that you were in and programs that have helped you along your career. With the focus on Dr. Martinez's program, even Dr. Moore, your experience of, I guess, cultivating leaders in community colleges, do you ever see your programs expanding into cultivating leaders in universities, for instance, HSIs or HBCUs, things like that?
Absolutely. The program that I went, I actually came out of the Lincoln Institute, and Lincoln Institute works with community college leaders in helping to bridge them into CEO positions in other community colleges throughout the country. And so I also am a product of also to the EOP program, is the Education Opportunity Program, which helped me when I was an undergrad navigate the system and the process of completing my first degree. There are opportunities for these programs to be expanded, but I mentioned earlier the ability to scale up. There are other fellowship programs that are geared towards those in the university level. At the 4-year, there's NASPA, and there are some of those programs that are coming out of HACU.
Hispanic Association of
Colleges and Universities. It really just depends on if there are resources, and as Dr. Martinez indicated, professional development for folks within the campuses that are working on not just HSIs, Hispanic Serving Institutions, but institutions in general, if there's opportunities for individuals in those organizations to participate and to attend, because they all have a cost. I went through Lakin Institute on a scholarship. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if it did or not.
Yeah. What you all kind of saw in terms of expansion and reach, not even expansion of itself, but even the reach of the program. I know you guys mentioned earlier that Blocka is part of that too. So do I need the mic? Okay, yeah. And then I guess I did kind of have another question. We don't have time, it's cool. But I was also wondering too, do you think that the struggle is scaling up the specific programs that you have, or is it having more programs that are alike? Does that make sense? So for instance, let's say Dr. Martinez had 1,000 people in his program and he could expand it to 100,000. Or is it the issue that there is only one program like Dr. Martinez's and not 1,000?
I think it's both scaling. There's enough interest in this program, but it's a small scale program. I think scaling it up would be very important, but the interest is there in among our Latino community. So I think that scaling up would be the best way to handle that.
Dr. Martinez needs a corporate sponsor. Because I mean, it is. I mean, you know, he can only do the program based upon the number of students that have the resources to come through. But if, like, I don't know, I'm just talking out loud. If Nike, you know, sponsored the program, or Pepsi, then you have that opportunity to bring in more folks and then be able to get more individuals through the program.
I think that's a big issue and a problem, is that a lot of times people that are raising money for schools, I was told recently that, well, Latinos really don't do that. Like, I was looking for an endowment and they're like, well, Latinos tend not to, private donors don't really bring in. And I think that has to change, where we take leadership and bring in more money to the school. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. So that's an issue.
And I think also too, we just need to be real about our language. I don't know about you, but all poor people I know all have a side hustle. And so it's really about taking that language and saying your side hustle now needs to be, you got to raise more dollars. I mean, and this is for, you know, my mom was a single parent. She had 2 or 3 side hustles to feed 6 girls. But you know, that's what we didn't call it that, but I mean, that's really what it is. And our ability to teach others how to do that.
Yeah, my side hustle is Hollywood. And, you know, it's true. You know, I really do care about education. To me, it's important. And I had dyslexia as a kid. I couldn't spell. I still can't spell, actually, which is kind of funny. I have dyslexia. I can't spell, yet I'm a writer. Because I had to teach myself not to care about things like that. That eventually I can find someone that can check my spelling and all that sort of stuff, but I'm not going to stop that from me being a writer. And that's just desire. Once you have enough desire, you'll allow yourself to be humiliated. You learn to fail. That's not a bad thing. Failure is what you learn from, is failure. And then you'll start to write, you'll start to get involved and learn more and do things like that and get back up again, and all those things that we do as people, we've done as a cultures.
Yeah.
Another question. I see a hand.
Hi, my name is Osvaldo Perez. I want to say thank you all for being here. And my question is, since all of you have worked with students before and been in that type of environment, how do you help the students who don't see, like, that are in college, but it's not because they want to be here, but it's more because, oh, my mom is making me come? Because I really believe that, like, if your environment has some people that aren't giving it their all, then you won't give it your all, because, you know, I don't know, it's like you see and you learn from what you see. So how do you help all students want to learn?
And I think it comes back to the institution commitment to student success, and to introducing those programs that, as I reached out to my fellows, one of the biggest problems our students have, that many times as Latinos, we don't know how to ask, or we don't want to ask. And so we need to be forthright in our outreach to those students, and have programs that are targeted at those students who need that assistance. So it's important that we have that mindset in our institutions, to especially look at Latino and Black students who may not have the wherewithal to challenge the institutions, but we need to help them.
That's a great question. I agree with Dr. Martinez. I also would add to that there are programs it's a difficult question to answer only in the sense that there's not just one answer. So I will give one or two in the sense that there's minority male initiative programs, because depending on the gender of the student or how they identify, I would try to put someone in front of him or her that they could relate to. I had a male student who didn't have any support at home, and he didn't have really much home life, and I think he had been homeless a few times. He wanted to come to college, but once he got here, he felt so out of place, he didn't know how to stay. Mm-hmm. So I put another student in front of him who it was an emancipated foster youth who actually had been homeless. And I didn't tell him a lot. I just said, he's just trying to figure out where he belongs in this space. And if you could help him by just sharing what you've done, that may be helpful. It really depends on how much you can find out about that student and how much they are willing to share. Because I'll be the first to say, I look well put together and presented now, but this is a whole lot of years and work of things that I have overcome and barriers. And so when I walk in the room, I'm perceived differently. I come in and there's well, the vice president is here. And so there's no information that's really going to be shared with me, and I'm okay with that. But I got to put someone in front of them that they feel comfortable talking to. So I want to try to find out as much as I can about that student from others that he or she may have self-disclosed to or whatever they've written down, and see if I can put someone in front of them that we can build a level of trust so that we can share information about how we can help them. And then you have to give as much information they're willing to take, and then you have to kind of sometimes step back and cross fingers. Because at certain times, people will hear you when they're ready, at other times they may not, but you want to make sure you put as much in front of them as possible and hope that they can find a connection.
I think for me, when I mentioned failure, how important it is to fail and to get used to it. Failure isn't the end destination. It's part of the learning curve that you have to do. And I think what we need to do is allow students to fail, to say, okay, let's get back. You failed, come on back in. Not a problem. You failed, come on back in. Look how long it took me to graduate, to get my master's, something like 30 years for me to go back to school, to fail and go, okay, let me try this again. And each time to learn that it was okay to fail. It's like, if you didn't do well in last semester, it's okay. Get back in, we'll keep working on you for another semester. If you didn't do again, do it more. You'll each time you'll learn. It's when you give up, when you finally go, I can't do it, is when you fail. The process of failing is okay. You can reapply, you can come on back into school, you can learn. And that's what is talking about retention. There isn't an opportunity for us sometimes when we do fail and we flunk out of school, basically, and we stop trying again. We don't. I failed. I was flunked in kindergarten. I was actually flunked in kindergarten. I had dyslexia. So my first opportunity in academia was flunking. And I was left behind in my course in school. I was considered slow. And I failed. Kindergarten, I failed. High school, I failed. I failed. I kept failing up. And that's the thing I will tell other people, even in this career, that as I've had successes in the career, and they're wonderful successes, I have 100 more failures to every one of my successes. 100 more. I just never got scared of failure.
And I think that role models in our schools, our teachers, if I had not had that 8th grade teacher tell me your college material, or if I had not had that typing teacher, Eduardo Garcia, if I hadn't had my shorthand teacher and Elena West that I could work with, I probably wouldn't be here. Yeah. So it takes those teachers, and that's where representation matters again. we need to be there. We need to be there for our students from all different walks of life.
And that's a great lesson, because even when I said, and I'm remembering it now, I failed in kindergarten. There was one teacher who took me aside
That's right.
and taught me and said, write a book.
Yeah.
And she said, write a book. And I wrote a book called The Colored Boy. It was about a boy that was every color in the world, and it was okay. And wherever he came from a different planet, and in his planet, color was appreciated and loved. And the more colors you had, the more you were celebrated. I wrote that as a 9-year-old boy. And it was a teacher that took me aside and paid attention to me. And that teacher saved my life. Saved my life. So you have power.
I'd like to add that we need to build allies as well.
Yeah.
Because if other teachers support the values that we have, they need to help us with all those, because we couldn't do it all by ourselves.
Yes.
So it's important that we build allies throughout our institutions to help those students.
Allies, important. Another question? Anything? Well then,
Hello.
I'll conclude.
One more.
Wait, this one more.
One more?
Over here.
Okay.
Hi. So I keep hearing student success. I have a background in higher ed. I've worked in higher ed, but I've also worked in workforce development. So I've had two sides, and higher ed's nonprofit, but really in communities and doing community work, working with ex-felons, moms who are returning to the workforce, those who are studying for English as a second language, people who are in major life transitions, who come from disadvantaged areas. But then I've also worked in higher ed, right? Community college. I've seen both sides. So that being said, I always hear student success, student success, student success. And everyone always says, well, we have Trejo and we have, these other programs that help folks who are people of color, but no one really focuses on shifting their perspective from student success to retention. So Rick, I'm glad you said retention. Because that's the key. The reason I say that is because having worked with several corporations, there's a reason why Latinos are not staying, or African Americans are not staying in corporate America. It's really hard to retain people of color in corporate America. So it's a double-edged sword. We want diversity. We want to prepare them for the workforce. We want to send them to, corporate companies, and they want that pipeline, but they can't make them stay. So then we have groups that they come up with, like employee resource groups with our ERGs, BRGs, right? But then, they wonder, well, we're hiring them, but they're not helping them be successful within their organizations, right?
Yeah.
That's part one. So I'll go ahead and answer that. But then I have a question to ask you as well regarding the faculty piece. Go ahead.
Okay, so corporate culture is a culture. Understand that. Corporate culture is a culture. It's a very different culture. It's a culture devoid of emotion. It's very businesslike. I was a vice president, so I was a corporate culture. My wife loved the fact I was a vice president. I was a vice president. I was a corporate culture guy. And I looked at it and it didn't fit my culture at all. Corporate culture was you fire 50 people so you get a bonus at the end of the year, but you fired 50 of your employees at Christmas and you don't tell them they're fired because you have a fiduciary responsibility not to tell them because they might steal things from you, office supplies or things like that. So to do that, and I remember that. I said I couldn't go to the party. And they said, why? I go, you guys are giving people $50 bonus coupons, things like that. Here's some $50 things. Every one of us corporate guys got $30,000 bonuses. And the workers were sent home without any money. And it was very hard for me to be in front of people that were my employees that I looked after and to say, hey, see you next year. See you next year. And I don't know, I'm getting so emotional about it, but it was corporate culture. That's what we do. And it's hard for people that aren't in that kind of culture, that are about we and about people and caring about people, to hide that. And that's what they ask you to do. So I see it and I go, how do we achieve that? I was very successful. And I'm surprised I'm emotional about this right now. I don't know why I'm so emotional. But go ahead.
There's a double-edged sword to that, because we talk about, you make a reference, corporate culture, but we're preparing these students to enter a workforce, right?
Yeah.
Which is corporate America, the trades, manufacturing, all these different transportation industry, all these different industries. And what I have learned, because my background is in human resources, is that it really doesn't matter what culture you're in or what type of industry that you're in. This is happening to Latinos and African Americans in every industry.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Working in workforce development, when I was filling in to teach ESL, I had, during the recession back in 2010, 2011, I had a lady come to her class just bawling her eyes out. I said, "Wow, Maria, what happened?" And she goes, "They let me go and they don't want to pay my vacation time." And I said, "Why don't they want to pay your vacation time?" "Well, they say that I'm not entitled to it." I said, "Wait a minute, were you a full-time employee? Were you this, ABC?" So my HR hat goes on, my legal hat goes on. And I said, "Oh, no. They owe you this." And I printed out the law, I highlighted it, and I said, "You go into that department, you demand that they pay you, or they're gonna hear from your attorney. You have rights," right?
Yeah.
But that's an example. She went in, sure enough, she comes back grateful as can be, they paid her out. But that's manufacturing for you, right? They take advantage of the little guy. So that's that. Part two, looking at hiring. We keep talking about faculty. Dr. Martinez mentioned faculty, right? We need faculty that look like our students. We keep hearing that in higher ed. The problem with that, and this is my HR perspective, and having worked in higher ed, is that we don't have enough, like Dr. Moore said, enough candidates in the faculty pool that are Latino or African American to hire, number one. And when they do make it to the applicant pool, you have committees and board approvals composed of 90% Caucasian people.
Yes.
Okay.
Because, it's true.
It's true.
Yeah,
It's true.
because-
And then you have someone who, they put a token, right? Because you have to have diverse representation on your committee. But if that person sees everyone else is voting the other way, now they don't feel comfortable to vote for that person of color, right?
It's very difficult because, I can look and go, look, here's my background. I wrote every show you can imagine, Mad TV and Living Color, every single big show you can imagine. I've written films, like Nothing Like the Holidays was set in Chicago. I've had a play on Broadway, the only Mexican American to ever write and star in a play on Broadway. I've done all that, and it's hard for me to get a job as a teacher.
Well, and I think what you are describing is
And I have an MFA.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is what we've all experienced, which is what I call the politics of this process. And that's why I was saying you have to sit down and negotiate with your academic senate and with your faculty union leadership. Because of that exact thing of what will happen inside the committee room. And so you have to be able to be realistic about the expectations and what they're going to encounter. I think also what you mentioned earlier, and what happens to so many of us, is just the racism of how we navigate different spaces, trying to feel included in spaces where we historically have not been let in or have had access. I have lots of conversations with other colleagues about dealing with microaggressions and about helping other folks who don't know how to navigate the system, just as you did for that young woman who came into, that you interacted with, who had been let go. That is a part, unfortunately, of navigating these spaces that politically become very, very hard. But that's part of the reality. That part doesn't ever go away. But I think we just need to start having more of those conversations, which is what we do in some of the leadership programs we've participated in and that we've come through. And I always say, at some point, you have to sit down and have the conversation about how you survive. And I say to people, when you come in these positions for the first year, I don't want you to do anything but listen. I want you to listen because you have to navigate the politics of who you can build an allyship with, because it's not if, it's when they come for you. and how you navigate. And the reason I think we've been able to be successful is that we know how to navigate. And I've even had to say to some people, this is not the time for you to go tell the world that you've been discriminated against. You have to process this, and you have to figure out how to navigate this, because you have a mortgage and you have kids to feed.
Yeah, I can speak white. I know how to speak white in corporate culture quite well.
And there's one important part of that process, and that is that we need to have elected boards who represent us, and who have allies that be willing to make that commitment to diversify their staff and faculty. And so it's important to all of us
Yeah.
to go out and vote and make sure that we have people that share our values.
And that's really important. I didn't have anyone in corporate culture that shared my values. And I had to, do things that I didn't like doing, and to prove that I was a good corporate guy. And I would feel horrible. I'd feel really horrible. And because I don't think that, I think we can be capitalist and also be compassionate. We can do that. We're all human. We're human.
Yeah, but I think also too, her point is excellent, but I also too am reminded of how far we have come. Because remember, there are thousands of folks that came before us who really, really, really had to navigate some stuff. Mm-hmm. We're still feeling it, but nobody was murdered. And there weren't, there are folks who lost their lives in order to help pave a way. So I'm not saying it's solved, but we have made progress. But understanding that, that's why I say you have to be ready to politically navigate the microaggressions, because they are there.
Yeah, I didn't have a dog sit on me. Simple as that. I saw the suffering that Cesar Chavez went through, because I knew him as a kid. And I saw my grandmother, who was considered a communist, was called a communist for striking in the tuna canneries of San Diego. And I've seen that. And then luckily my children will never see that. I'm happy. But these are the things we have to do. We have to recognize how far we've come and recognize how far we have to go. And then we have to look for allies to join us in that fight. Because in the end, it's not us that should be doing this. It's actually white people should be joining us as well, because we both gain from a world without prejudice. We all gain from that world. It's about equality, justice, and all the things we're proud of. That's the world I want to see. And that's why I love this conversation. And please keep coming back to Latino Thought Makers and tell your friends. Morton College puts this out there for everyone. Enjoy watching us tonight. I want to conclude this, but before I do, I want to tell who's going to be here next September 15th. Can we roll the tape?
Everything good that has happened to me has happened as a direct result of helping someone else. Everything. The message is, for me, take drugs and alcohol out of your life, and education is the key to anything you want to do. Well, anybody can deliver that message. The only problem is they're not listening unless you got their attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, Danny Trejo will be here in 2 weeks. So Danny Trejo is coming to Morton College, and I'm proud to see that, because he's going to talk about restorative justice and his lessons he's learned coming from being an ex-con to an icon. So I'm proud to announce Danny Trejo will be here in 2 weeks. So thank you, everyone who's come. Thank you, Dr. Moore. Thank you, Dr. Martinez, and all the work you do. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, Rick. Thank you, Rick, for celebrating our successes, our possibilities. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.